In this video, we're going to use some of the drawing skills that you've learned and apply them to the landscape. Some of those key exercises that we've done, like the gesture and the massed tonal drawings, are really useful tools to be using when you're outdoors sketching and wanting to record that immediacy of the landscape. The gesture is a really good drawing to be using when you're doing thumbnail sketches, and you'll remember when we talked about gesture drawing, I spoke about different types of emotional mark making, those happy and angry lines, and you can be using that sense of emotion in your lines to be recording how you feel or how that landscape is making you feel. Also, if you're wanting to then get the broader shapes and the broader feeling of light and dark and how the light is in the landscape, that's where looking at those tonal masses is really important. Massing out the shapes that you see in the broader sense, as well as recording some of those finer, maybe architectural details that you can see. So first I'm going to do some small thumbnail sketches. So here I use a small golden section rectangle and trace around them numerous times in my sketchbook before I embark on sketching with as few simple lines as possible. So this is where you can think about a horizontal or a straight line, then using a single curved or wiggly line and a single zigzag line, and trying to record the landscape in just those three lines as many different ways as you think you can. When I go outdoors sketching, I always make sure that I've got a smaller sketchbook with me. It means that I'm able to record those incidents that happen in the moment, the way a cloud looks as it passes, that animal, the bird as it flies past, and it's a really useful thing to have to refer back to later. When you've done a number of small thumbnails, it's then that you can start to think about working maybe on a bigger scale. So I've now traced around my larger golden section rectangle, and I've now started to look at the major masses of the landscape. So in the case of the landscape that I'm looking at, you've really got this darker area of the landform in front of me, as opposed to that lighter area of the sky. Then across the lower landform areas is the cast shadows from the clouds on the earth, creating a light-dark pattern that I'm trying to see and trying to record. I then start to break that up again now into further parts, adding further details, architectural details of the aqueduct, etc. this next drawing, I'm taking a slightly different approach to the landscape. Rather than drawing the broad vista that I can see in front of me in a massed and tonal way, I'm approaching and looking at the plants right at my feet and what I'm sitting in amongst. So as such, I take then more of a gestural or felt drawing in this case. I'm thinking about making different marks for different plants and being aware of the breeze and those elements that are having an effect on what I'm seeing there in front of me. I'm just slowly building up one over the other, not really worrying about what's in front and what's behind and any about it being a finished drawing. It's simply just my impressions of what I'm seeing there in front of me at that very moment. You may also consider, when you go out into the landscape, playing with a little bit of colour and a little bit of watercolour. So I just want to quickly give you a couple of ideas. I'd be working, if you're going to work outdoors, be working with a brush like one of these. This is a Neef, but it's what you call an imitation sable, so it's not real sable in there. Somewhat similar to some of the squirrel hair mop brushes and things like that. And you can see it's sort of soft and fluffy and doesn't keep a really good point. So it means that you can be working and doing a variety of different marks, which is what I want to remind you of now. So, and the way to test and to get a feel for those marks that you can do with the brush is to do this, is if you think about loading the brush with paint and you think about the marks that you get if you dot it. So there you can see I'm just doing the very tip right through to really pushing the brush down. Now don't be afraid of really being rough with the brush, it can take it. So we're doing the dot and a dabbed mark, which is when you come down there on the side of the brush. And again, it's about lightly as well as pushing with a bit more pressure as well. So dot, dab. If we drag the brush like this, and both in the drag it's about a slow drag or a quick drag too, and dragging in different directions and against the brush like that too. And the last one is the roll mark, where you can see how I'm using the brush here, using it up on its tip and down and roll it around like this and let it create marks like that. Now these are then marks that are really good for working outdoors and maybe creating some cloud studies and things like that. The small sketchbook that I used earlier for drawing, I'll also use for making watercolour notes as well. Again, these are small, quick and immediate, and this is where those sketching techniques that I showed you with that brush before can really be used well. Often just with colours that I have there sitting in front of me on the palette, these are very short impressions of things that I can see there in front of me. The formation of a certain cloud, the light in a certain moment on a form. It's a really useful thing to refer to later when you're maybe working up your drawing or working up a watercolour or it later in the studio.